Hey everyone, welcome. For those of you that are new to this channel, I really want this channel to be a place where you can find inspiration, but not only that, but really kind of tap into your creative side through a variety of outlets. So that's why I add some music in the intros for these videos, because I truly believe that there are an infinite number of outlets for creativity, and you really got to kind of find what you connect with and what resonates with you. So that's my ultimate goal for this channel. If you guys like that idea and you want to hear more music and you want to hear more about cameras and photography and videography, then definitely subscribe to my channel and give this video a like. Okay, so today we're talking about one of my favorite lenses. Actually, to be honest, all of the RF lenses are my favorite lenses because they're all amazing. The RF 15-35 f2.8 L lens is probably my most used lens due to its focal length. In this video, we're going to talk a lot about that lens, but we're also going to talk a lot about why it's amazing, absolutely amazing on the Canon EOS R6. So some quick specifications about this lens. So the focal range that we are looking at is 15 millimeters to 35 millimeters, which is really amazing. And we're going to kind of compare that with some of the other competition today with the other companies. But before we do that, let's get into some of the specs of the actual lens. So this lens uses the Nano USM autofocus technology, which is great for quiet and fast autofocus. So it's going to be ideal for any video work that you do, along with photography as well. So obviously, being an L lens, this lens is dust and weather resistant, and you're also getting those fluorine coatings to help with the moisture on the lens. Consistent with the other L lenses, you're also getting that air sphere coating to help with the ghosting and flare. One of my favorite things about this lens is that you're getting a really short minimum focus distance. So it's right under a foot, but when you set this camera to 35 millimeters, you can get really close up to your subject. So that really makes this lens more versatile, and I think that's why I find myself reaching for it more often. So right out of the box with this lens, if you were hooking it up to an RP or an EOS R with no in-body image stabilization, the lens is going to give you up to 5 stops. But we'll be getting into why I think that this lens is amazing with the EOS R6, and it has a lot to do with the image stabilization. But before we get into that, let's talk about some of the other offerings from different companies and why I think that the 15-35 is really special. Alright, so let's look at these modern offerings for ultra-wide zoom lenses, and we're going to be looking at Sony, Nikon, Fuji, yes, that's right, can't count out Fuji, and Canon, of course. So, okay, so first up, actually, to preface this little section I got going on here, I just want to say I'm not an expert with the technical aspects of these lenses. So in terms of like lens engineering and stuff like that, that's not my forte, but I do have many years of experience with photography, so kind of take that for what it's worth. And I just kind of want to look at the practicality and value of these lenses. So the Sony G Master here is a 12 to 24 millimeter f2.8 lens. And the reason I think that's cool is that, unlike a traditional ultra wide that's, around 14 to 24, you get that extra 2 millimeters. So while that doesn't seem like a lot, it does make a big difference. And, but the only thing that would hold me back from getting this lens if I had a Sony camera is that the price is so expensive. So that's $3,000 for a 12 to 24 lens, and I believe that's the most expensive of these 4 camera companies in terms of their ultra wide offerings. So yeah, while it's definitely a cool focal range, it's definitely an expensive lens. So you're gonna have to figure out, is that extra 2 millimeters worth it? Let's move on to the Nikon 14 to 24. Look at that lens. It's kind of a weird shape. Okay, so So, I mean, first things first, the focal range is kind of boring. You know, they played it pretty safe with the 14 to 24 millimeters at f2.8. Now that being said, I would bet, I'd be willing to bet that this camera has this lens has the best image quality and performance out of all of these lenses I'm talking about today, just because you know, Nikon played it pretty safe with that focal range, and it should have been pretty easy to develop a good optical formula for this lens and their new mirrorless mount. So I bet you that this lens has the best image quality. Now, I'm not sure about that, but that's what I'm assuming. And what's cool about this lens is that it's cheaper than the Sony by a lot, I would say. So, you know, $2,400 compared to $3,000. It's a pretty big difference. You know, you're just losing that extra 2 millimeters of focal range. So, all right. So moving on to the Fuji, we have an 8-16 f2.8. So if you are looking at the full frame equivalent focal range, you are looking at something similar to the Sony 12 to 24 millimeter lens. So I think that's really cool that Fuji was able to design a lens like that. And in terms of performance, I'm sure you're not going to be getting as great of a performing lens as these full frame lenses, just because, you know, they have to go all the way to 8 millimeters when they're designing this lens. And so maybe you might get more vignetting and barrel distortion. Again, that's an assumption, but you know, based off of these sample images, if there is, it looks like it's pretty easily corrected, and it's a really high performing lens. So yeah, so that's what you get from Fuji if you're going to go with their ultra wide zoom. And finally, last but not least, we have Canon. Before I talk about the Canon lens, let's talk about their website design. I think that they really need to get someone to step up the game for their websites, because this, I mean, look at this, compared to the Fuji and the Nikon and the Sony. I mean, come on, Canon. Your website's boring. All right, but let's talk about the lens. RF 15 to 35 f2.8 for $2,300. So this is the least expensive. If we're not counting the Fuji, out of all of the full frame lenses, this is the least expensive at $2,300. And I would argue to say that it is the most practical focal range out of all of them, just because you are getting that ultra wide reach, or that ultra wide frame, I should say. And you also have the ability to have an awesome portrait lens in the same package. So I definitely love the 35 millimeter focal length. To me, if I want to take portraits while trying to get the environment in the frame as well, 35 millimeters is pretty ideal. So just the fact that you can have an awesome ultra wide angle landscape lens, but also have the ability to get portraits without changing your lens, that's just really awesome to me. And you know, and the reason why I love this lens so much. And to me, out of all of these offerings, this, like I said, this is the most practical, and this is the best value. Okay, so let's get into why I think that the R6 paired with the 15 to 35 is an excellent combination, one of my favorites personally, and why I think that the 15 to 35 millimeter focal range is more ideal than the other offerings that we get from the other companies. So paired with the EOS R6, you're going to be able to get up to 7 stops of image stabilization with this lens, and that is really amazing for people who do landscape work or go backpacking a lot, because in those situations you might not want to carry a tripod with you. And I've been out with this lens multiple times in situations where the sun is setting and I'm not getting that much ambient light into the sensor. This lens paired with the R6 will allow you to handhold the camera for an extended period of time. I also really think that this lens takes advantage of the new tech in the R6 and that 12-point connection on the RF mount. You're getting a really fast and accurate autofocus, and the image stabilization in the lens really works well with the image stabilization in the camera. To me, the 15-35mm focal range is ideal for those situations because you can take a variety of landscape shots, but you can also add in really nice environmental portraits if you need to. So before I had this lens, I'd feel the need to take a portrait lens or some kind of telephoto lens with my ultra wide lenses for landscape, but now that I have that, I feel like I can just take out one lens, and if I really need to take some kind of portrait shot, I can use that 35mm focal length, which I love using for portraits anyways. Like I said earlier, the fact that you can get up pretty close to your subjects also adds to the versatility of this lens. Obviously, due to the awesome image stabilization, focal range, and autofocus in this lens, I think that this is ideal for video work too. So just like photography, I find myself reaching for this lens just as much for video work. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that quick look at the RF 15-35mm lens. That's it for today. I'll see you guys next time.